Welcome to a rapid introduction to a tool developed by CTC Software. In this session, we're going to cover the Occupant Flow Analyzer on the BIM project suite. This particular tool, again, can be found on the CTC Software tab in the project suite, and right here is the Occupant Flow Analyzer. This tool can be used for a number of things. The first thing I'm going to use this for is to actually calculate my occupancy in the individual rooms. So I'm going to zoom in on training room 1. I have told it my occupant load factor is an area parameter called area per person CTC. I am telling it to store the results in a parameter called occupancy CTC. This is a number parameter. You can also configure exactly how it's going to do some rounding up, either by levels or smoke zones. You can add additional factors inside of here, adding different groups for grouping of the actual rounding up. In my case, I'm going to just round up based on the spatial element, individual rooms, and I'm going to redistribute the overall loads uniformly across the entire level in this case. Run my calculation for rooms. It's going to give me a little bit of a warning once in a while, depending on how many areas you've got actual occupancy load factors assigned to. I'm just going to go ahead and tell it to calculate this. It's going to tell me every single area that it could not calculate if they were not occupiable. I'm just going to click OK. What it has done, though, is for those spaces that do have an occupancy load factor assigned to it, it's giving me occupancy calculations rounding up to the nearest whole person in those spaces. In this case, apparently, I didn't actually assign an occupancy to my sales room back here. Not a big deal, at least not for today's example. Next, what I want to do is I want to figure out the egress paths, the critical paths for the building. A couple of steps. I'm going to make sure that I'm telling it elements that are impassable, things people can't walk through. Doorways, for example, you can walk through, but you can't walk through a piece of furniture. So it's going to go ahead and tell me that I can't walk through that. I'm going to have to walk around it. I'm going to calculate the critical path for rooms using the parameter called occupancy. I can ignore certain areas if they're smaller than a certain size. My target components, that is the doors I'm going to exit to, I can have some occupant flow factor for those components and use the width of the door to determine the maximum flow of the occupant flow factor, or I should say the width divided by occupant flow factor. Up here, I'm going to just do this calculation for my current level. You could calculate either the entire building, specific elements that you selected, all spatial elements. In my case, I'm going to do just the building level. I've already added my 4 egress points. I'll show them to you now. If I pull this box off to the side, you'll see I've got 4 doors specified as exit points on the building. You can choose either interior or exterior doors for double door systems here. That's up to you. Ultimately, I'm going to tell this to find the paths, and it's going to think for a moment here while it runs through these different calculations. Depending on how large your floor is, how large the building itself is, that's going to determine some of the overall time it's going to take to actually run an occupant flow factor, or an occupant flow analysis here. Sometimes as you're analyzing this, there might be some warnings about geometry that may pop up. That's normal. If you have AutoCAD imported geometry, that could be a problem. Sometimes the AutoCAD geometry can't be analyzed. And so in my case, in my project, I have a wall that was actually generated from an AutoCAD import, and I have a piece of furniture that was generated from that as well. And so this tool can't detect what that full geometry is because it's not real Revit geometry. Ultimately, at the very end, I'm going to get a report that I can use to actually understand exactly what was done. Speaking of which, here's that report. So I'm going to pull this across onto the screen. We can see that the load at certain different points for different doors is listed right here for this floor. 15, 95, there's 0 egressing one of my doors, and 27 at the final door. The critical distance, the longest path to get to that door, is listed over here to the right. And of course, if this is beyond what is appropriate for current code requirements, I'd have to adjust my design accordingly. In my project out here, I can actually see the individual egress zones. Shortest paths all being calculated to the individual points of egress. If I have any questions about what the egress is at a specific, or the number of people at specific points, I can simply tab through and understand for that point what the number of people are passing through there. In this case, 2 occupants at this point. And if I go down a little bit further right here, I can tab into and understand the occupant numbers at the next point. Sometimes you have to tab a little far, but you can always find out, in this case, 4 occupants, and I think at this one it is 15 at the final point of egress for this particular building. So thank you for your time in looking at this. Hopefully this was meaningful for you and you can understand a little bit more about the Occupant Flow Analyzer. For more detailed videos, take a look at our YouTube channel or certainly get a hold of us and we'd be glad to talk with you more in detail about how the Occupant Flow Analyzer works.